Good morning. You can do better than that. Good morning. There you go. It's good to see all of you here this morning. The past couple of weeks, we've kind of been looking at the miracles that Jesus Christ performed. And I want to take a poll real quick. I'm going to go over here first. If you believe in miracles, raise your hand. Okay? If you don't believe in miracles, raise your hand. Okay? All right, let's get this side. If you believe in miracles, raise your hand. I saw some hands go up really quick. That's awesome. If you don't believe in miracles, raise your hand. Okay, so we're all in the same agreement that we do believe in miracles. You know, it was something, the whole idea of miracles is something that I've kind of struggled with for a big part of my life. Until about 6 or 7 years ago, I started seeing that miracles finally made a little sense to me. It made sense to me that God, who created everything, was free to invade our world whenever He chose. But up until 6 or 7 years ago, I struggled with that. But today my belief is not only that God did invade the earth 2,000 years ago with the miracles that are listed in the Bible, but I also believe that God invades our lives today. He invades His creation today to sprinkle life with unexpected miracles. And I believe that miracles happen every day. Let me give you some examples. First, there was a missionary couple who lived in Ecuador. They were very poor. One day the wife was having her quiet time, and when she finished, she began to make a list of all the groceries that they needed, that she needed to go and buy if she had the money. Things like sugar, eggs, bread, all these things. The list maybe had 50 or 60 items on it. When she got done writing her list, she folded it up and stuck it in her pocket, and she went about her day. When she got home that day, there was a bag of groceries sitting on her doorstep. The grocery bag contained every single item on her list except for one. There was no bread. Even though the bread wasn't in the bag, as you can imagine, she was extremely excited. And when her husband came home later that day, she was so excited to tell him about the bag of groceries, but he burst through the door and he said to her, "Honey, you'll never believe what happened to me today. Somebody came by the church and donated bread to us, and now we have 4 loaves of bread that we can eat. It's a miracle. There's no way you could rationally think about how that could happen. You have to say that something unusual was going on, and I believe that God was involved." Another instance is a story about Mother Teresa. Mother Teresa is a great hero of mine, and I love to talk about her life. I love to talk about her ministry, and I love to just learn more about Mother Teresa. The story goes like this. She had a pharmacy in her place in Calcutta, and people would come to her when they were sick and when they were dying, and she would be able to help them out. And one day a man walked into the pharmacy, and he said, "Mother, I'm in trouble. I'm going to die unless I get these particular pills, and the only place these pills are made is in England." So what Mother Teresa did, she went to the cupboard in the pharmacy and she looked, and sure enough, they didn't have those pills. So Mother Teresa was ready to pray for this man, and she was ready to be by his side while he died. As they were talking about what the future held, a donation came in. In this donation, right on the very top, was a bottle of these specific pills that this gentleman needed to survive. It's a miracle. It's evidence of God reaching down into our world, into the happenings of today, and it sends us a very clear message. One more example I'd like to tell you that I have heard about. You don't have to believe each of these stories. They're not in the Bible. But to me, they give us glimpses of what God's heart is. A few years ago, a group of people went to Samoa on a mission trip. They were basically going to Samoa to put on a Bible camp and a sports camp. They were doing games and crafts, doing sports, and all kinds of things. And the most important thing they were doing is they were telling all these Samoan children about God's love. When this church group went to Samoa, they were expecting somewhere in the area of 150 children. When they got to this remote village in western Samoa, Instead of 150 kids, they saw 750 kids. This is a great thing, with one exception. They weren't prepared to feed 750 children. They'd only planned for 150 kids. They were giving out goldfish for the snack. Now, goldfish aren't a big deal in America. My kids eat them by the box full. But for these Samoan kids, this was a new thing, and they were excited. And they didn't want to have to look into the eyes of a Samoan child and tell him that there's not enough food. They didn't know what to do. So they gathered around the boxes of goldfish crackers, and they said, God, if this is your will, would you just make this to be enough? And then they got out the Dixie cups, and they started scooping up the crackers, putting them in the Dixie cups, and putting these cups in the hands of these Samoan children. Every kid that day got a cup full of crackers. There's no way to explain it. Math does not equate, except that God reached down and made something miraculous happen. I believe that God does that all the time. Every time a miracle happens, I believe that's God's way of giving us a glimpse of what heaven is going to be like. People are healed. It's a miracle. It's a glimpse of what heaven will be like. People are fed. Needs are taken away. That's a glimpse of what heaven will be like. When we look at miracles and we see the blessing that they are, it helps us to understand why it's so important for us to look at them in the Bible. The author C.S. Lewis put it this way: a miracle retells the story in very small letters that is written in huge letters across creation that is sometimes too big for us to read. And that's the message of God's love. That message that's spread out over creation is the message of God's love. God loves each one of us. God is shouting down in the midst of a miracle, I care about your needs. God is whispering in the midst of a miracle, I want a relationship with you. That's why we look at miracles. If you pull out your bulletin and look at your note page, I want to do the first fill in the blanks. The miracle of Jesus revealed to us God's heart, His love for us. They also reveal His will for our lives. The miracles of Jesus reveal to us God's heart. That's His love for us. They also reveal His will for our lives. I'd like to take a look now at the miracle of the bread and the fish. And just look at this and say, what does it have for us today? How does this apply to our lives? Listen along. So they got into the boat, and this is Jesus speaking to His disciples, and they went off to a remote place by themselves. Someone saw them going, and the word got around. From the surrounding towns, people went out on foot, running ahead of them, and they got there just before Jesus arrived. And when Jesus arrived, He saw a huge crowd. At the sight of them, His heart broke. Like sheep with no shepherd they were. He went right to work teaching them. When His disciples thought this had gone on long enough, and it was now quite late in the day, they interrupted. We're a long way out in the country, and it's getting very late. Pronounce the benediction or blessing or prayer, and send these folks off so that they can get some supper. Jesus said, you do it. You fix supper for them. They replied, are you serious? You want us to spend a fortune on food for their supper? But Jesus was quite serious. How many loaves of bread do you have? Take an inventory. That didn't take long. 5, they said, plus 2 fish. Jesus got them all to sit down in groups of 50 or 100 on the grass. He took the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and He lifted His face to heaven in prayer, blessed, broke, and gave the bread to His disciples. And His disciples in turn gave it to the people. He did the same with the fish, and they all ate their fill. The disciples gathered 12 baskets of leftovers. More than 5,000 were at the supper. Now, when you look at this, I want you to think about the bread and the fish. These 5 loaves of bread are basically about the size of a hamburger bun.